So I want to give us a little review on how we can use multiplying by tens, hundreds, and thousands when we're multiplying by numbers that aren't tens, hundreds, or thousands. So in this example, we have 9 and 75 hundredths times 82. Now, one thing I always like to do is I always like to get an idea of what type of answer should I be looking for. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think, well, 9 and 75 hundredths, that's about 10. So this is kind of like 10 times 82. It's going to be a little less than that because it's 9 and 75 hundredths. And 10 times 82 is going to be 820 if we move that decimal over one time. So I know that my answer is going to be somewhere around 820. And because my number is smaller than 10, 9 and 75 hundredths, it's going to be smaller than 820. But we know it's going to be somewhere around there. Now, one thing I can do is I can use this idea of tens, hundreds, or thousands when I'm multiplying and dividing. Now, I first look at these numbers, 9 and 75 hundredths times 82, and notice that it's much easier to multiply when I have whole numbers to work with. So we can actually take 9 and 75 hundredths, and we can make it into a whole number by moving this decimal over 2 times. Now, from before, we talked about moving a decimal over once is like multiplying by 10. So moving it over twice is like multiplying by 10 twice, which is the same thing as multiplying by 100. Now, if we do that in this case, we would have 975 times 82. Now, if we simply take, and we'll use a calculator for this, if we simply take 975 times 82, we're going to get an answer of 79,950. Now, you're going to notice that this number, let's look it up one more time. Make sure I put in the right number. 975, yeah, times 82. 79,950. Now, you're going to notice that this is not close to our estimate of 820. We said it's going to be about 820. Now, because we changed this problem by multiplying by 100, we have to undo what we did there. We made 9 and 75 hundredths 975, which is 100 times too big. So in order to fix what we changed, we just have to do the opposite of multiply by 100, which is divide by 100. So I just have to take my answer, divide it by 100, and I have my final. Now, in this case, you'll notice there isn't a decimal in this number. We can always add one right at the end of a whole number. And to divide by 100, that's the same thing as dividing by 10 twice. Going to move it back 2 times. And we end up with 799 and 50 hundredths, which is much closer to our 820. Now, using this idea of multiplying and dividing by tens, hundreds, and thousands, we were able to make this work. Let's look at one more example. Let's look at the example of 8 and 3/10 times 4 and 62 hundredths. Now, just like last time, I'm going to estimate here. I'm going to say 8 and 3/10 is about 8 holes. 4 and 62 hundredths is actually closer to being 5 holes, and 8 times 5 is 40. So I'm going to estimate somewhere around 40 is what we're looking for here. Now, in this case, you'll notice both numbers are decimals. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say 8 and 3/10. If I were to move this decimal over one time to the right, that is the same thing as multiplying that number by 10, which would give me 83. If I were to move this 462 hundredths, I would have to move it twice to the right, which is like multiplying by 10 twice, or multiplying by 100, which is going to give me 462. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take 83 times 462, which we'll again do on our calculator. 83 times 462 gives me 38,346. Now, again, you'll notice this is nowhere close to our estimate here. Now, this one changes slightly. You'll notice that what we actually did was we multiplied this first number by 10, but effectively we multiplied this second number by 10 twice, or 100. Now, because we then multiplied those two numbers, that's like 10 times 100. 10 times 100 is 1,000. That means our answer is 1,000 times bigger than it should be. 1,000 times bigger because we multiplied it by 10 and then we multiplied it by 10 two more times, which is like multiplying by 100. Now, in order to fix this, we're going to do the opposite, which is dividing by 1,000. Whole number, my decimal goes to the end. To divide by 1,000, I'm going to move it back 3 times, and I end up with 38 and 346 thousandths, which is really close to being 40. Now, using this idea of multiplying and dividing by tens, hundreds, or thousands, we can make decimals into whole numbers, which are really easy to multiply and divide by, and then we can just move the decimal back in the end. Think about how we can use this, and we're going to look at some practice examples today.